Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started just a few seconds early here, and we're going to have a slightly different order of service this evening. We're going to do Bible study first and end in prayer. Artie's going to come up and cover the prayer time for us. I'm sure most of you by now heard about kind of what was going on with LCS today and a bomb threat, and the kids just now getting let go of, maybe not. It was late this afternoon. If you hadn't seen the news or followed WDAM, I didn't know about it until they came and told me. LCS had a couple of bomb threats. Part of the threat was any children seen leaving the building will be shot on sight, and so they locked them in and wouldn't let anybody out. Parents weren't allowed to get in. Nobody, they had to treat it very seriously. They've just been released within the last 20 minutes for the end of the school day. But Justin Tyler has been teaching this month our youth. Well, Sarah, Catherine, his daughter, is one of the ones that was locked in. Where she goes to school, and so he was up there trying to get her, and is not going to be able to teach. So I'm going to teach here. And I've got a hard stop at 6:55. Artie's going to step up, and y'all are going to have prayer time, and I'm going to run down to the youth and speak to them tonight, and then we'll all get done at a normal time. But we just have a little bit different order of service this evening. And so, of course, be praying for all of them. It turned out to be nothing, but clearly there's a young person somewhere, or I don't know, a person somewhere that's fixing to be in a lot of trouble when they get caught. But there's a lot of students who are also very shaken up, and parents, and so a lot of people locally need some prayer over this, and so remember that tonight. Go ahead and open up to 1 Chronicles 13. That's where we'll be at this time. Over the last week we looked at 1 Chronicles 12, and it was when all the people were coming to David as he has now been anointed king over all of Israel there at Hebron. All the people from the different tribes begin to come into him, and they gather together, and it starts going through all these different people who swore allegiance to him, and their prowess and their renown, all of that stuff, who they were, and then it ends at the end of chapter 12 with this big feast over, for all the people coming in. That this is they're celebrating David being king. United over the kingdom. And so today we pick up with a story that it's a fun story, and it's actually, I guess, in God's providence, and he saw fit to kind of ordain a short chapter for tonight, so that's good. 1 Chronicles 13, beginning in verse 1, it says, "Then David consulted with the captains of the thousands and the hundreds, even with every leader. David said to all the assembly of Israel, 'If it seems good to you, and if it is from the Lord our God, let us send everywhere to our kinsmen who remain in all the land of Israel, also to the priests and the Levites who are with them in their cities with pasture lands, that they may meet with us, and let us bring back the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul.'" Now, where is the ark during this time? Does anybody remember why are they having to go get the ark? It was. So mark 1 Chronicles 13, but let's flip back to 1 Samuel 5. And we'll just glance at this real fast. 1 Samuel 5 tells of this, and Jason is right on the nose. It says, "Now the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of the God and brought it to the house of Dagon and set it by Dagon. When the Ashdodites arose early the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and set him in his place again. But when they arose early the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen on his face to the ground before the ark of the Lord. And the head of Dagon and both the palms of his hands were cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. Therefore neither the priests of Dagon nor all who enter Dagon's house tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. And so the Philistines do. They come and capture the ark and they take it off. And they take it to Ashdod. They put it in this temple to their god Dagon. And during the night, Dagon falls face first before the ark. They come in the next morning. They find him like that. They set him back up. Well, what do you think happens the next night? He falls down on his face again during the night. And only this time his head's come off and both of his palms or his arms have come off so that he's nothing but a trunk left. And so just the body of the statue is there. So what do you think the Ashdodites do? They say, get this thing out of here. And they begin to send it around to several different cities within the Philistine land. And they send it to Gath and they send it to a few other places. Well, what happens as it travels around? Everywhere it goes, they keep having these plagues. There's plagues of tumors and plagues of mice or rats and these different things. Until they finally say, we want this thing out of here. Okay? If you look down to verse 1 of chapter 6, it says, Now the ark of the Lord had been in the country of the Philistines 7 months. And the Philistines called for the priests and the diviners, saying, What shall we do with the ark of the Lord? Tell us how we shall send it to its place. What do we need to do about this thing? This is a menace. It's a trouble to us. And so they want to get rid of it. Look down to the last verse of chapter 6, verse 21. It says, So they sent messengers to the inhabitants of Kiriath-Jearim, which is in Judah, saying, The Philistines have brought back the ark of the Lord. Come down and take it up to you. Then the men of Kiriath-Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. From the day that the ark remained at Kiriath-Jearim, the time was long, for it was 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So we've got the Ark of the Covenant going into the hand of the Philistines. And they, of course, are not treating it with the holiness that it demands. And God begins to judge or pour out his wrath against them. And so they start wanting it gone until finally they reach out to the people of Judah and say, you guys have to come get this thing. And the people, the inhabitants of Kiriath-Jearim, do go and get it. They bring it to Abinadab's house, and his son Eleazar is consecrated to be the keeper of this ark. Now, we're told there in verse 2 that it remained there for 20 years, okay? Sometimes I like to point out places in Scripture that some people will point to say, hey, there's a discrepancy here, but I do it so that you can have some understanding and know how to handle this. It is not as big of an issue as some people demand. So it says very clearly that it is there for 20 years, right? Okay. When we look, if you flip the page again to verse 8, or chapter 8, you see that Israel demands a king. Chapter 9, they're searching for Saul. Chapter 10, they find and select Saul to be king. We find out later on that Saul rules for 40 years. After those 40 years, Saul dies. David becomes king of Judah, and Ishbosheth becomes king for 2.5 years. But then David becomes king of all of Israel, but he reigns in Hebron for 7.5 years after that. And so if you say the life of Saul plus this about 10 years after Saul's death, you're looking at about a 50-year period. And so 20 years it's there, but here you'd have David not going to get it until later on. So you have somewhere between 40 and potentially more than 50 years. How are we supposed to understand this? Is that a discrepancy? It doesn't have to be. One, when it comes to Jewish number systems, the reason there's a lot of issues with the numbering is that you have translations of numbers, and number in Judaism or in the Hebrew language is difficult because there are no numbers in the Hebrew language. They use letters. And sometimes it gets complicated over what they're referring to. That's why sometimes 30 becomes 300, becomes 3,000. It's a matter of a decimal place. And then, so sometimes this is what happens. This one is most readily understood to mean that the 20 years is talking about there of the 20 years that Eleazar was looking over the ark at his father's house in Kiriath Jearim. And so they said that's, the most likely reason that you have these differences in dating or time periods that are laid out here. And then it comes back to the question that it always does a 30-year gap when you're talking about something that was thousands of years old, is that an issue, or is this a translational type thing? I say that it's not much of an issue as far as whether or not Scripture is trustworthy, because there's plenty of good explanations as to how this type of thing comes about. It doesn't mean that it's untrustworthy or that there's error been committed. It just means that there is maybe a lack of clarity in our understanding if we're trying to read this in a language that is not the language it was written in. And so just pointing that out to you, there's plenty that we can go back and look at to, try to figure that out. But I just want you to be aware of that. So back to 1 Chronicles 13. He consults with the people of Israel. He calls them all together, David does, and says, hey, do y'all think we should go get the ark? Now, he says that he consults them to see if it is from the Lord as to whether or not they should go get it. It does not say that he consults the Lord. And we'll see in just a moment why that might be something that we take note of, because of the way he kind of he runs into some issues in a little while here. So verse 3, they decide, verse 3, they said they haven't consulted all the days of Saul. Verse 4, then all the assembly said that they would do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. So David assembled all Israel together from the Shihor of Egypt even to the entrance of Hamath to bring the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. David and all Israel went up to Baalah, that is, to Kiriath Jearim, which belongs to Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, the Lord, who is enthroned above the cherubim, where his name is called. They carried the ark of God on a new cart from the house of Abinadab, and Uzzah and Ahio drove the cart. David and all Israel were celebrating before God and all their might, even the songs with lyres, harps, and tambourines, cymbals, and with trumpets. When we have this image here, so David, after calling all the people together, they said, it is good for us to go and get it. So they get a group together, and they go to Kiriath Jearim to retrieve the ark. They go down to get it. When they get there, they've taken this cart with them, or they picked one up there. But they take the ark and they put it on this cart. And these two guys, Uzzah and Ahio, are going to drive the cart. And now this is oxen. Oxen are big animals. Sometimes, if you're like me, you sometimes forget about what an ox is. You don't think cow. Think buffalo. It's an ox. It's a big animal. And they've got this ox-drawn cart, and they are leading it forward, okay? And they're celebrating. And when we think about David, David's a passionate, zealous person, okay? What we know about David, he loves the Lord. He doesn't always make the right decision like none of us do. But he genuinely, I believe, he tries to do things the right way most of the time. And so what we see here is he's sent after to consult the people to try to decide if it's right to go get it. They said, yes, it is. But then they go and get it. But we're not told that they asked God directly to go get it or not. And we're fairly positive that he has not consulted the law as to how it is to be transported. Now, how do we know that they did not consult the law on how it should be transported? They didn't do it the way the law says. Look with me at Numbers chapter 4, I believe it is. Yeah, Numbers 4. Let's see. Numbers 4, verse 15, it says, when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy objects with all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is to set out after the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them, so that they will not touch the holy objects and die. Those are the things in the tent of meeting which the sons of Kohath are to carry. So, how are they to transport it? Carry it. And why are they to carry it? So that they don't touch it. Okay? I mean, that's pretty specific. You're to carry it so that you don't touch it. Okay? So, hang on to that. Back to 1 Chronicles 13 and verse 9. When they came to the threshing floor of Chidon, Uzzah put his hand out to hold the ark because the oxen nearly upset it. The anger of the Lord burned against Uzzah, so he struck him down because he put out his hand to the ark, and he died there before God. Now, what do we know right off the bat? They weren't doing what God told them to do. And God tells them the reason they were to carry it back in Numbers chapter 4 was so that you don't touch it. Because if you're all toting it, and there's a group of you, and they carried it via a group of people, less likely to drop it and less likely to touch it. So they're transporting it in a way they weren't supposed to. Oxen are big animals who aren't concerned about small potholes or running into a ditch or taking a curve too sharply. We don't know exactly what happened, but it became unsettled, meaning its securedness became unsound. Uzzah probably, just to be honest, probably was not trying to be disrespectful in his intentions, reaches out to brace it and touches it. And what we have to be careful of is to not in this moment say that to judge God by this. Sometimes we're tempted when we read something of God behaving in a way that we wouldn't ourselves behave. Sometimes we look at God. And I shared with the group this morning, there are times, all of my children are different. Liam is the sweetest of my kids by far, but he is the most easily distracted of the group. He is usually very medicated, and he is very distractible. And there are times where I will tell Liam to go do something, and he runs out of the room to go do. He's going to do what I told him to do. And 20 minutes later, he's not doing, nor has he done what I've told him to do because he got distracted. You know, something shiny was around the corner, it's out of his mind. And I try not to get angry with Liam in that moment because I know he did not, it wasn't intentional. I give him some correction and put him back on task, and he'll do it. He wants to obey me, he wants to please me, but he gets distracted. If I'm not careful and I read this, sometimes we can put this kind of thing on God, saying, well, God should have potentially been a little more understanding. If we, Uzzah didn't mean to. He was trying to do what was right. The ark was falling. And what we fail to realize is that when we talk about God's holiness, which is what we're talking about with the ark, we cannot look at God's holiness and his reaction to his holiness the same way we do with my child obeying me. Those are two completely different things. When it comes to the things that are holy and set apart and sanctified, like God is holy and sanctified, we cannot, it is absolute and demanding. This is the same understanding that we have. The reason that when they make comments in Scripture like to error in one point of the law is the same to transgress the entire law. Because ultimately what you have done when you have error in one place of the law is you've been disobedient to God, and that is the greatest sin there, is the just disobedience to the Lord, is that you have transgressed His holiness. So it really doesn't matter which individual item of the law you've done. The bigger thing is that you have not obeyed God. And so this with His holiness, when they've reached out and touched it, they have, in this instance, defamed or transgressed God and His commands by contaminating or affecting the sacredness of this object. They have not done what they were supposed to do. And so God is, in that moment, He is completely justified. God is always justified, but He is completely justified and right to judge in this way. And so Uzzah is struck down. But then we look at verse 12, and verse 11. And David's response, as recorded in verse 11, we see it in 2 Samuel chapter 6. And if you like to go back and compare passages, this is a good one to compare. It's almost word for word for what we're reading here, but you have the record of David becoming angry. And it says, then David became angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, and he called the place Perez Uzzah to this day. And so, why was David mad? Because the Lord struck Uzzah. Now, what it doesn't say here is, it doesn't tell us exactly who he is mad at. He's mad because of this, but he's not mad. It doesn't tell us who he's mad at. And so it is worth just, thinking about for a moment. And when we're trying to answer that question, I would invite us to look at verse 12 as a kind of helping us to understand why he's angry in this moment. So he names the place Perez Uzzah. Verse 12, David was afraid of God that day, saying, how can I bring the ark of God home to me? This afraid of God, when it says this here, this is not meaning he is scared of God. It means that he has a respect or fear of the Lord in this moment. And when we look at the following verse on how can I bring the ark of God home to me, this is not a question of methodology. It's a message of almost appropriateness, like how can I continue on with this endeavor? So what I believe we're seeing here in verse 12 is a realization that he's doing this wrong. And so you look back to 11, and he's angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah. And this is a place, I guess, I can say if we want to discuss this, we can. But it seems to me to point to the fact that David is realizing his error in this moment. I believe one of the things that we see with David, he is a man who makes mistakes. But I think the thing that kind of qualifies him as a man after God's own heart is that he honestly pursues God, and when he does mess up, he generally will repent and turn back to God. He'll take that correction. And so I think that's kind of what we see here with David in this moment. And he doesn't. So verse 13 says, so David did not take the ark with him to the city of David. He's living in Jerusalem at this time. But took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. Thus the ark of the God remained with the family of Obed-Edom in his house 3 months. And the Lord blessed the family of Obed-Edom with all that he had. David in this moment kind of pauses. And he does not continue on bringing the ark back to Jerusalem. He leaves it there at the house of Obed-Edom, which historically is just right outside of Jerusalem. But he doesn't bring it on in. He leaves it there. And what is so amazing is, we'll see it in a couple of weeks when we get to chapter 16. We get the ark moving back into the city. And it's during that you have this wonderful picture of worship of David as he is dancing in the streets before the ark as it comes back into Jerusalem. And that's where his wife, Saul's daughter, tries to shun him very famously and tells him that it's not dignified for a king to behave this way. And he says, oh, I can become much more undignified than this. And it's a wonderful picture that I think we're going to see when David does finally bring the ark into Jerusalem. This is my hard stop point. So do we have any questions or comments? You think he was scared? He is motivated to find the right way one way or the other. Mm-hmm. No, he didn't. Yeah. I do believe he's not in that moment asking, how can I do this, like method. He's going, how can I do this? I'm not doing it. Yeah. That's kind of, I think so too. That he's realizing his mistake. I do believe that I've not handled this right. I don't know that he necessarily in that minute remembered Numbers 4, but I think he said, I have not done this right. And so we don't know what we don't know. It doesn't tell us certain things. So. Yeah, he should have just consulted with God and not with men, but yeah. All right. Well, Artie's going to lead y'all in prayer meeting, and remember.